And I hope that you have Sefer Bereshit on hand as well. We'll start straight into Parashat Shemot. It starts with Ve'ele Shemot B'nei Yisrael Haba'im Mitzrayma. And these are the names of the children of Yisrael who have come, who are coming to Egypt. Et Yaakov, with Yaakov, Ish ubeto ba'u. A man and his family all came down. We could spend a lot of time here, but for the sake of wanting to cover a lot of subjects, I just want you to notice the ve'ele is very often spoken about, the vav hachibur, that first letter there, vav, that indicates to us that what we're about to read is very closely connected to what has been. So imagine a new volume starting with the word and. It's connecting. There's no way you could have Sefer Shemot without first having had Sefer Bereshit. And so as we move forward, I also want you to notice how the camera is going from Bnei Yisrael. It's going from the big picture, the big macro nation of Israel that are coming, and then it's going to speak about Yaakov, about the person, about the smaller. It's going from the macro to the micro. I don't know how to fix this view. Let me see, maybe I could see all of you. I'll do gallery. Okay. Anyway, it goes on and it names all the children of Yaakov, and none of this is news to us. It tells us their names, and it tells us that Yosef had been in Egypt. And then it tells us that Yosef had died, and all of his brothers and that entire generation, which is, again, I would say redundant, because at the end of last week's parasha, we have all this information. And the Torah is not in the business of doing a review for us. It's not it's not something that normally happens in Torah where we see a review like this. So based on this introduction, I believe the text is beckoning us to go back, to go and see, what are we connecting this to? What is the Vav and the Ve'ele? Why are you telling me about Reuven and Shimon? Why are you taking me from this big picture back to this little small picture, from the national picture to the family unit? And on top of it, I'll just add this last verse of the first Parshiya, which says, Ubnei Israel, you'll be familiar with these terms. We say it on Pesach when we recite the Haggadah, Bnei Israel, Paru vayishretzu, vayirbu, vaya'atzmu b'me'od me'od, vatemale ha'aretz otam. The Torah is telling us a message. Bnei Israel, they multiplied, and they swarmed, and they were plentiful, and they were strong, exceedingly. And the land had filled either with them or had filled them. Vatemale ha'aretz otam. These are very, very strong words. Many commentaries say, they use this phrase, these words, to support the idea that they had become assimilated, that they filled the land, but at the same time, they were filled with the land, with the cultures, with the customs, with all of the physicality that Egypt and its culture offered. They became filled with that. And with this introduction, the Torah is telling us, maybe why don't you turn back? Let's start with turning back just one page. Just go to the end of Bereshit. This story that we're about to read in Sefer Shemot, I'll preface it by saying, if we had miracles in Sefer Bereshit, by the time we get to Sefer Shemot, the miracles go viral. By viral, I mean every page we're going to see something else that is completely out of the natural order taking place. In our parasha alone, we're going to have, and we'll discuss them, we're going to have tremendous things that defy every law and every order of the natural world. And I believe Yosef had already predicted this to his brothers. At the end of Sefer Bereshit, if you'll turn to chapter 50, we're just going to see the last 3 Pesukim. Yosef tells his brothers, I am going to die, which we hear also now in the beginning of Shemot that he dies. I am going to die. Ve'elohim pakod yivkod etchem. And Elohim, and if you see me smiling, it's because my favorite words in all of Tanakh, I think I decided that these are them. Pakod yivkod etchem. And I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but I realize it's not me, that the Torah keeps using this same word. It keeps sprinkling it throughout the trajectory of our process, of our progress, of our movement, of our journey forward. And this word pakod, I'm coming to realize it today. We cannot live without this word in our lives. The word itself, for those of you who haven't heard me say it 1,000 times, I like to define it as its most organic expression, which is where it first appears with Sarah, when it says Hashem pakad et Sarah. I like to interpret or understand or experience this word as meaning that when Hashem was pakad Sarah, he was doing something that was out of the ordinary. He was having a barren woman at 90 years old have a child, and therefore he created this word for that experience, for the experience that says you can't give up. As long as the word pakod exists, as long as you could use or express that word, or understand or integrate it into your understanding of the world, as long as you live a life believing that this word has tremendous energies and powers. And the word, I don't want to give any kind of credence to just saying the word, it's believing this concept. This is what Yosef is telling his brothers. You're about to embark on many years of torture and a hell-like experience. And the only way you're going to get through and come out on the other side is if you understand that the world, together with all the craziness, also has this concept of pakod embedded, enmeshed within it. And the concept that he's telling now Yosef is, with Sarah, we saw Hashem pakad et Sarah, that the Yud Kevavke, that the God of allowing man to be a creator, he's the one who introduced this concept where man and woman especially, it's beautiful because we say bizchut nashim tzidkaniot, that it's the women that brought us the zechut to come out of Egypt, and it's the woman who was involved with the first pakod, so they're going to be involved with these future pakods, and I believe that the women are going to bring the ultimate redemption as well. So we cannot underestimate the strength of this word. But when God first does that for Sarah, it's the God of allowing human beings to be creators and to create themselves. Yosef is saying something new now. When he says Elohim pakod yivkod etchem, he's saying the way Elohim created the world, Bereshit bara Elohim, the name that God used to create the world, where the natural world was created by Elohim, prepare yourselves, because the pakod is going to become part of your reality, part of your natural existence. It's such a strong, it's not again, when we see things that are unfamiliar or unlikely or improbable to us, we see them as unnatural. And Yosef is saying, we're ready to graduate to the next level. And the next level means that when you see something, we should anticipate these miracles as they are part of creation. The way a seed yields a fruit, that is the same way that Yosef wants all of us to be able to get to the next stage, to see those things as part of God's creation. As I'm going to use the word integration, because that's the word that's going to most carry us through this perasha, through this sefer, and really to continue our journey till our final redemption. When I use the word integration, and it may not be the best word, but it's what I have at hand, it means that we shouldn't separate the natural from the unnatural, the ordinary from the extraordinary, the mundane from the miracles. We should integrate them. They coexist. I'll give you an example so that you could understand where I'm going with this. When God first creates the world, it starts with Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. There was an integration of the heaven and the earth. He didn't create the heavens separately from the earth. He created them together as one. And what does that mean? Even the next verse supports it so beautiful. It says the Aretz was tohu vavohu. The land was in a state of chaos. V'choshech al penei tehom. And darkness permeated the depths of the world. But what do we have in our integration? So we understand what God is telling us. What Yosef is telling us is that Ruach Elohim merachefet al penei hamayim. Even though there's tohu vavohu on the penei tehom, on the depths, in the waters, even though there's all of this chaotic, I don't even have a word. I don't even know. Nothing is in order. This disorder and this chaos, despite or amid the chaos, who's there? Ruach Elohim merachefet. The Spirit of God is hovering even in those places. And that's what Yosef is telling his brothers. When he's telling him, Pakod yivkod Elohim, the same Elohim that was in the chaos in creation, that didn't leave the land on its own and the heaven on its own, but integrated the two, Elohim is going to be with you. Excuse me. Elohim is going to be with you on the next leg of your journey. And now, why is this even, I'm getting all choked up, it's so beautiful. Why is this so beautiful? Because it doesn't just say, Elohim pakod yivkod etchem in verse 24 of chapter 50. In verse 25, it goes and says, Pakod yivkod Elohim etchem. It takes the same words and it mirrors them. Elohim pakod yivkod Elohim. It's like the words are looking in the mirror. We call this chiastic. And why is it so exciting for all of us? Of course, for that generation, but for all of us reading Torah today. The way man was created was through a chiastic structure. The way we were created was using this type of literary technique. Vayivra Elohim et ha'adam b'tzalmo, b'tselem Elohim bara oto. Same idea. Elohim pakod yivkod Elohim. It's literally words looking in the mirror. And what that says to us and what Yosef had wanted to impart to his brothers and to us is, yes, these magnificent realities exist, but they only exist if there is a reflection, if there's a reciprocation. God could only send his energies in a direction if those energies are being received on the other end. So as in as much as we want to receive the pakod yivkod, we have to have this notion that it exists. We have to be open to it. We have to believe in it, and we have to invite it in. And this is how Yosef ends his Sefer. He's giving all of us this message. And now we have to sit back and ask ourselves these questions. Why is Yosef such a fantastic person to deliver this message? What gives him the authority? Well, let's start with his own personal experiences. Why is he such a master? Why is he the Baal, the owner of this information, for him to be the one to impart this to us? This is how the Sefer is going to end for us. And he's not only going to tell us that these forces exist in the world, he's going to go further. He's going to tell us how to capitalize on them, how to maximize them. The first thing is he was shown those dreams. First, he was given the coat, of course, and the coat represented this idea of unification, which is something that at the very end of his Sefer, he's still working towards. And we had said, I don't know if he achieves it at the end of his lifetime, but it's something that he champions throughout his entire life. He tells his brothers twice, he has to forgive them twice because they seem to not being able to forgive themselves. And his last words are, Atem chashavtem alay ra'a, you thought badly on me, but Elohim chashava letova. Even those ideas are integrated, your thoughts and God's thoughts. And sometimes, even if your thoughts are tohu vavohu, and man's thoughts may be evil, guess what? Hashem chashava letova. We need this today more than ever. We need to recognize that, yes, men may desire to bring evil in the world, but those thoughts are integrated with God's thoughts as well. And whose thoughts are going to trump? Whose thoughts are going to win the day? Whose thoughts are the ones that are going to govern the way our world ends up moving forward? So Yosef has this dream, and now I think the dreams Yosef is realizing are a how-to. They are a manual for how to achieve all the stripes in his coat to be united. How to, not only how to get them to be united, but what happens, what's the reward, what's the prize, what is the ideal. And Yosef realizes now, when he sees the bundling of the sheaves, he may not have realized that it's 17 years old, but I believe by the end of his life, he realizes the first thing that we all have to do is we have to integrate ourselves. Every person was bundling their own bundle of wheat. And that's how Sefer Shemot is going to start. Ish ubeto ba'u. Before you're going to be a nation, you're going to be a man, and then you're going to be a family, and then and only then could you be part of a nation. He's realizing, or maybe the dream was depicting for him, before you're going to come and bow, before anything else is going to happen in the dream, everybody, every one of us has our own bundle, whether our bundle is our family, whether our bundle is all the components of ourselves, meaning our right brain, our left brain, our upper brain, our lower brain. We did so much work on this over the past few months in Sefer Bereshit. The heart, the brain, integrating all of those. The integration that has to take place internally is going to be the first step. And then, of course, the second dream is going to depict what happens when we're able to do that. What happens when the integration is possible? That's where the magic happens. That's where you start to see stars and moons bowing down to human beings. You see the entire universe at the whim of the human beings, which is something that we would not have otherwise understood. But then again, if we looked at creation, everything that was created before man came into existence was created to serve man. The fruits, the trees, the lights, the waters, the earth, the grass, all of that was put in place so that humanity could survive. The only thing that was created after man, that's a class for another day, but it's something to think about, is the Shabbat. Think about that. But as we move forward and we want to ask ourselves, how do we keep the magic alive? How do we keep these things in our lives? How do we live the pakod lifestyle that Yosef is promising us and telling us exists? I'll give you another example. His sons, what does he yield? What are his toledot? Yosef is the one who's able to yield these two children, Ephraim and Menashe. I want to revisit their beracha, because their beracha is our beracha. It's the way we bless our children every Friday night. It's a blessing that is, again, I know I have a lot of favorites, but this might be my real favorite. If you'll turn to chapter 48, and you see chapter 5, Yaakov does something beautiful. The first beautiful thing Yaakov does before he even says a word, I just want to say, is the fact that he takes the two brothers and blesses them simultaneously, because he and his brother were not blessed simultaneously. And he felt that blessing them both together and having them both present and accounted for in each other's blessings would be might have a better outcome. So he says in verse 5, he says, your two sons that have been born in Egypt until I arrived here to Mitzrayim, lihem, he tells Yosef, those two sons that are yours, I am now adopting as mine. Ephraim and Menashe are going to be like Reuven and Shimon to me. And not only that, but they're each going to get their own, they're going to be full-fledged inheritors. They're going to get their own nachalatam, their own nachala. And then he goes on and tells his story about how Rachel passed away and she was buried and he wasn't able to bury her in her rightful place. But I want to fast forward now because he's asking that he be buried. This is the get one free that we're going into last week's parasha. But here, I want you to see verse 15. You could really skim back a little bit to verse 14 and tag it on. Yisrael, which is the name for Yaakov, the national name that reflects his future. Yisrael takes his right hand and he puts it on the younger brother Ephraim. He is the tza'ir. The Torah is telling this to us. And the smolo, and his left hand, he puts it on the head of Menashe. Shikel et yadav. He specifically had interchanged or let's see what he switched his hands. He maneuvered his hands, maybe you could say. Because Menashe was really the Bechor, so Menashe should have gotten the right hand, but instead he put his right hand on the younger son. And he blesses Yosef first, and then he goes and blesses the boys, his boys. That's where verse 16 is. You're all familiar with this. It's the most beautiful song. Hamalach hagoel oti mikol ra. Don't worry, I'm not going to sing for you. I couldn't if I tried. And what is he saying? we started the class by saying, be aware of the physical world, of what you can see and of what you can't see. They both exist. There are forces in this world. I can't stress it enough. Yaakov can't stress it enough. Yosef can't stress it enough. This is his blessing. He's saying, Hamalach hagoel oti mikol ra. There's no way I could have gotten through all my trials and tribulations had I not had a guardian angel. Don't be afraid to say this. I know we don't believe in the tooth fairy, and I know we don't believe in all these other crazy things. And so we threw everything out with the crazy folklore. But let's bring back some of the magic. Yaakov is saying there are such things as malachim. He's encountered them. He met them in Machanayim. He saw them on his sulam in his dream. He's been bumping into angels left and right. Lot saw them. You know, we shouldn't be above. It shouldn't be a childish thing for us to believe in angels. This is what Yaakov is telling all of us today. Don't be so sophisticated. Don't be so mature. Don't think he's such an adult because you're saying, oh, please. No, you want to be mature and sophisticated. He's saying this at the end of his life. He's admitting there are forces, there are angels that are guarding us. And my blessing to you is that you believe that, and that these angels will also accompany the next generation. But he says something beautiful. He says, Vikare bahem shemi, in order for the angels to continue their mission in the world, which is to safeguard the children of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and all of us. In order for that to happen, Vikare bahem shemi, they have to go by my name. They have to recognize who they are. They have to know who they are. They have to know who their father is, who their forefathers are. If you know who your forefathers are, then you will be accessing these blessings. Veshem avotais doesn't, I mean, every single letter on parchment is valuable, but we know who his fathers are, but he's putting them in the blessing because we can't stress enough to all future generations. We need to walk around and say, my great-grandfather was Abraham, and his son was Yitzchak, and his son was Yaakov, and his sons were Yosef, and all the Yehudas, and all the others. And I'm part of that legacy. That's who I am. That's how I identify. And if that's how I identify, Yaakov is saying to his grandchildren and all of us who are his great-great-great-grandchildren, if you call yourselves by my name and by the name of Abraham and by the name of Yitzchak, then you too will have not only angels escorting you, but you will have v'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz. I don't know if there's anything more beautiful than these four words, v'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz. What do they mean in English? In the simplest English, it might be they should proliferate, they should be as plenty as fish in the center of the earth. Now, I just told you that they were gorgeous words, but they're really pretty oxymoronic because it's impossible, if you know fish, it's impossible for fish to proliferate in the kerev of the aretz, in the center of the earth. For fish to proliferate, for schools of fish, where do they need to be? They need to be in water. So we read it again and we say, oh, wait. You mean to tell me that Yaakov is blessing Ephraim and Menashe and telling them, my blessing to you, my boys, is that you'll always be fish out of water. That doesn't sound so great either. So we have to look at it again and say, what is Yaakov saying to these boys? What is the blessing that he's giving them? He's giving them the blessing that we've been talking about since the beginning of class, which means stop limiting yourself to what the natural world provides or what you're accustomed to. You're accustomed that fish proliferate in water. And I'm giving you a blessing. And the blessing is that even when you're not in water, and specifically to these boys who are fish out of water because they are children of Yaakov, but they've never been in the waters of Canaan. They've never been at the well. They've never been to the place, to the source of the land that they stand to inherit one day. They never came from there. So they're literally fish that are born out of the waters. And so here, what Yaakov is telling them is so profound, even for all of us today, is wherever we are, especially if we're in a place where we are out of water, we are out of our comfort zone, we are out of our place of sustenance and comfort and where we need to be for our health. If we're someplace out of that space, we should still be able to survive, and not only survive, but we should thrive. As fish thrive in water, we should be able to thrive even if we're out of the water. These are blessings that Yaakov is saying, how does this happen? Well, if we want the celestial beings to bow down to us, Yosef tells us we have to be united with ourselves and with our brothers. And now Yaakov is telling us, if we want miracles to happen to us, we have to realize and accept that angels do exist. They may not be in the forms that you may see on paintings in the Louvre. I don't know what they are or how they work. And just because I don't know how they work, it doesn't mean they don't exist. And that's what Yaakov wants to tell them. But not just that, we have to connect to our ancestors. And we have to sometimes realize that maybe the uncomfortableness, maybe the being out of the water is in order for us to thrive and in order for us to proliferate. And now we can go back into our Perashah this week with the idea that this concept has been addressed. And there are many other instances of where these natural forces are integrated with the supernatural forces. But for us for today, I want to get us back to the Moshe story. It's very exciting. We have the Moshe Bateva story. Maybe before I take you there, because this is hard text to read, especially in today's world, where we see very clearly there's a strong wave of, I can't even say just anti-Semitism. I think there's an anti-Jew force or movement out there. So maybe we'll just take a couple of minutes. I want to show it to you. It's not new. Everything new is old again. And it's right here. If we start in verse 8, chapter 1 of Shemot, Vayakom melech hadash al Mitzrayim, a new king comes to Egypt, and he doesn't know Yosef. And then commentaries go in any which way, from it was a new king to it was the same king who chose not to recognize Yosef, to maybe Yosef and his offspring were no longer recognizable as Jews. They no longer had their values and their morals and their ideals, and so they were not recognizable to the king. However you choose to interpret that, the next few verses, I feel I owe it to you to just show it to you, and then we'll move on because it's harsh reading. Vayomed el Amo. And this is the dictator, and this is how a movement begins. He speaks to his people. He comes up, the king, the leader, with a hypothetical scenario. And he says, Hine am b'nei Israel. Enjoy that we're calling them b'nei Israel here, because in the next few verses, they're going to be a nameless people. The first thing they're going to be stripped of is their identity. Hine am b'nei Israel, rav ve'atzum mimenu. How does he describe b'nei Israel? Why are we even on the radar? Why does the king feel that he needs to make a public announcement? Why does this have to be the headlines of the newspapers that Bnei Israel is much greater and stronger than all of us? And it doesn't just mean they're greater and stronger than us. If we put the accent on Rav ve'atzum mimenu, not only are they great and strong, but mimenu, it's from us. It's what they've taken from us that has made them who they are. Their strength comes mimenu, comes from us. And now we need a plan, because if they got this strong by taking from us up until this point, we have to outsmart them. You know, we're talking about the Mesopotamian region. We're talking about the superpower, the epicenter of the world at the time was Egypt. And now they're saying what we have, and it's so chilling, because what we have is intellect. We have astrologers, we have scientists, we know the mathematics, we know the musics. We are so cultured. Let's take our culture, let's take our knowledge and use it. But how? Let's use it not for good, but let's use it for evil, because we need to outsmart them. Pen yirbeh. If we don't outsmart them, the word pen is always for negative. Pen yikraenu ason. Maybe something terrible is going to happen to Binyamin. The pen is the speaker's way of telling the listeners, prepare for the worst case scenario. Let me spell it out for you. It could be, Ki tikrena milchama, one day there could be a war, venosaf gam hu, when we don't have a name anymore, now we're a who. And the Jewish people, what will they do? They might team up al sonenu, with our enemies, with the people who hate us, venilcham banu, and they'll fight against us. The very same Jews who've been our guests and we've been their host country, and they proliferated, and they were very successful, and they were strong, and they were great. You know what might happen to them? They may take all the blood that we pumped into them, and they may use it against us, and they may team up with our enemies, and they may fight with us. And then it uses these words, ve'ala min haaretz. We're not sure who's the one who's going to leave the land. It stinks either way. Either the Jews are going to take everything that they've sucked out of us, and they're going to leave, which is actually what, we didn't take everything, but we do leave them. And as soon as we leave them, the Torah is very clear to state that Mitzrayim is never, ever going to reach the heights that it was when the Jewish people were there. When we leave Egypt, Egypt never recovers. So this is a little bit prophetic, but what is this idea that is being, the propaganda that's being delivered, is that we're going to team up with a hypothetical enemy, and either ala min haaretz, they're going to be thrown out of their own land, or we're going to leave them and leave their land. So what do they do? Vayasimu alav sarei misim. It sounds all too familiar. Let's tax the people that have become strong, that have become rich, because that money belongs to us anyway. It's ours to begin with. And the only way to get it back, they took it from us. So the only way to get it back is legally by just increasing their taxes. Lema'an anoto besivlotam. That's the way we're going to torture them. We're just going to raise the taxes. Vayiven arei miskenot, and the cities, and the words for arei miskenot, which were storage cities, but the word miskan means painful or cities of torture. You start to think of the ghettos that were built so that they could impoverish and torture the Jews. They built these cities for Paro, and they built Pitom and Ramses. And the crazy part that the Egyptians just were totally repulsed by is kasher ya'anu oto ken yirbeh. The more they tortured us, the greater we became, and the more we flourished, and the more we proliferated and spread out. And at this point, we have the word vayakutsu. Like Rivka had used that word katzti bechayai, I'm disgusted from these wives of Esav at the time, she had said. Well, now Mitzrayim is disgusted from Bnei Israel. And so they enslaved them, they gave them back-breaking work. Vayimareru et chayehem, they made their lives miserable with all types of building, with clay, with bricks, all the work in the Sadeh. And then we go into the story, and I'll just take one more minute to tell you this because we can't leave these women out. They come up with an edict. And since the taxing and the back-breaking labor isn't really accomplishing their final solution, the king decides, pretty odd, Vayomer melech Mitzrayim lemeyaldot ha'ivriot. The king is having an audience with the midwives. I mean, why would you have an audience with the midwives? And either they were Egyptian women who were midwives to the Jewish women, me'aldot ha'ivriot, or they were actually Jewish midwives. In either case, what Paro's about to embark on is heinous, even in the eyes of the Egyptians at the time. Taxing the people, that they could live with. Giving them physical labor, that they could live with. But what he's about to ask the midwives is to look at the children when they're delivering them. And if it's a boy, murder him. And if it's a girl, she could live. That's something that he's not putting in the newspaper. That plan is not for everybody to see. And the women are called Shem ha'achat shifra v'shem hashenit pu'ah. The commentaries very beautifully say that we are speaking here of Shifra and Pu'ah as being Yocheved and Miriam. Regardless, it's a beautiful story if it's the Egyptian midwives who are invested and involved in bringing life into the world. That's their life's work. And you're asking them to take the lives that they bring into the world and to kill them. That's way too much to ask of anybody. And the Me'aldot, they are going to keep their morals, and they're not going to do with what Melech Mitzrayim tells them to do. If anything, Vatechayena et hayeladim. The language is so beautiful. It doesn't just mean they don't kill the boys. They go out of their way to make sure, even if there's a boy who's being born, who's having, let's just say, breathing problems or anything, they're going to resuscitate those children. They're going to completely defy. And what they say is beautiful. Again, I don't know if they're Egyptian women saying this or Jewish women, but it's recorded here beautifully. The king of Egypt calls the Me'aldot and says, what are you doing? Why are you allowing these children to live or reviving these children? And the Me'aldot answer Paro and they say, the Jewish women are not like the Egyptian women. Ki chayot hena. So chayot hena could mean in the simplest language that they are, maybe they give birth like chayot, like animals that give birth in the field. They give birth unassisted, and that way they might be chayot. I think the Torah is telling us something else. It's recording this conversation between the king and the midwives for us to read. And it's saying, Jewish mothers are chayotena. They are alive. They are givers of life. And they're givers of life. It's being said right before Moshe is born, because it's the nashim, it's the women. It goes right back to our dedication for today, as the Edis is dedicating in memory of her mother and her grandmother. It's the understanding that women who give birth are giving birth to life to a next generation. And here, the Redeemer is going to be born right here in the next page through this story. Torah is telling us, women, we are champions of Chayot. We are the ones holding the flag of life. And right next, the next chapter starts with our famous Vayelech ish mi bet Levi, Vayikach et bat Levi. So this entire edict that the king made, that all the boys should be killed, was abolished, and he replaced it with all the boys who are born, whether Jewish or not, should be thrown into the Yeor, and all the girls could live. Kol habat techayun. He's playing on the words that they said that the women are chayot. So he's saying, okay, since you say women are chayot, then the bats could be chayot. The women could continue to be chayot, but the boys have to be thrown in the Yeor. What's so clever about the next chapter? It's clever, it's cleverly written, it's miraculous on so many different levels. So I'll start to unpack it. It starts with Vayelech ish mi bet Levi. I love when the literary techniques are used in such strength. Vayelech ish, the idea of having everybody in our story be anonymous, is on steroids. There's an ish who comes from Bet Levi. We don't know his name. He takes a woman, she's a Bat Levi. We don't know her name. Vatahad ha'isha, the woman who we don't know her name, gives birth, gets pregnant. Vateled ben, she gives birth to a son who also doesn't have a name. Vatere oto, she sees him, because he doesn't have a name. Ki tov hu, vatetzpinehu shelosha yirachim, and she sees that he is tov. Again, what is she seeing in this child? Vayad Elohim ki tov. She's seeing the raw potential of this child. And commentaries come and say, when he was born, the house was filled with light. Maybe they're playing on the word tov, because that's the first time the word tov appears in Torah, is that God sees the light, and that is tov. So these midrashim have their bases all rooted in these verses. Velo yachla od hasefino, she no longer could hide him. So she takes a tevat gomeh, she takes a basket of wicker, and vatichmera bachemer ubazefet, and she covers it with clay and pitch, which I know we've seen this idea before of a teva with Noach that was also covered with kofed and zefet, but here we have something unusual. We also have chemad. Chemad is a clay. Clay is a heavy material. Clay is a little scary that maybe it could be such a heavy material, it could cause the basket to sink, which of course it doesn't. I don't know if that's a miracle, that it was chemed and it didn't sink, or if it's the way the text supports the commentaries that say that the babies were used in bricks when they couldn't complete the quotas. This idea of a baby inside of clay like Moshe is being described here. Well, maybe it was the cleverness of this Isha, which we know to be Yocheved, that she is skirting the rules. She's saying, you said that the boys have to be thrown into the Yeor. and I threw my child into the Ye'od. You didn't say anything about them not being inside a basket before I threw them in the Ye'od. I mean, it's a technicality, but if you hire a good lawyer and she got caught, maybe she'd have some kind of I misunderstood the instructions. You said put the babies in the Ye'od, and that's really what I did technically. So I'm not defying the edict. I'm just, I wouldn't imagine you'd want me to put a baby that doesn't yet swim straight in the Ye'od. Again, these are all interesting readings of the text, but for today's purpose, what I want to bring you to is two of my favorite women. I say it too much, they're all my favorites, but these two are great, two great women. The first one is, and Yocheved herself is pretty great. You know, we leave her on the sidelines, but she's fantastic. She's the one who takes the basket. She's the one that covers it. She's the one who does all of this. Vatesem bayat hayeled, she puts the child in the basket. Vatasem basuf al sefat hayeod. She is very active. And if we want to talk about miracles, one of the things we'll say for sure is that if you want to separate your fate, which their fate was that every single boy had to be thrown in the Ye'od, if you want to separate that from your destiny, which is the future that you create for yourself, we clearly have to play an active role. We saw that with the butler, right? He took the grapes, he squeezed the grapes, he brought them, and he's the one that ends up back serving the king. If you're going to be inactive like the baker, or you're going to be inactive and not play a starring role in your own life, then you don't have a chance for the miracles to kick in, which is what's going to happen next. It's so beautiful. So she puts him in the Ye'od, and verse 4, Vatetatzav achoto merachok. And his sister, what does she do? If you don't love this, I don't know what. Vatetatzav. She doesn't just look with her binoculars from afar. Vatetatzav, the word nitzav, we've seen it throughout the book of Bereshit. You need Bereshit to inform Shemot. Tetatzav means I'm standing at attention. I am ready. I'm like a nitziv. On the one hand, I'm like a pillar. I am like a monument. You're not going to move me from here. I am immovable. I am rooted and firmly planted in this scenario. I will not be swayed from my mission, which is we'll say what the mission is in a minute because it's described beautifully. But she's also an Netziv. She's like a commander. Because she makes herself like a monument and she positions herself with strength, all of a sudden she's barking orders. All of a sudden she's coming up with solutions. She's having a conversation with the princess like she's her BFF. You have to read this and say to yourself, this is not the normal course. And what does she do? The next 4 words are the whole story. Lede'a ma ye'aselo. She wants to see what's going to happen to him. Now, if she was like Hagar, who also let go of her child, also by the water, right? If she was like Hagar, what does it say by Hagar? She moves away and she abandons the child because she doesn't want to see him die. Oh, not Miriam. Miriam is standing by. She has popcorn in her hand. This is going to be the greatest show she's ever seen. She's prepared. She doesn't know how or where or why or who. I don't know how this is going to come about. I can't script it for you, but I'll tell you, says Miriam, this is going to be something you don't want to miss. And that attitude, that's what brings the pakod. You've caught that level of expectation, that level of anticipation. She's anticipating. And right after it says that, well, God says, all right, this is where I kick in. This is my cue. I have somebody expecting me to do a great thing. So here I come. He sends the daughter of Paro. to go bathe in the Ye'od, and her ne'arot are with her. And she sees the teva in the suf, and she stretches out her hand and she takes it. I've done, and we don't have so much time today, but we've spoken about the tishlach et amata. And the commentaries say that either she stretched out her hand and miraculously it stretched so long that it was like a elastic Gumby kind of a hand. And that's how she was able to get the teva. And the commentaries also say she sent an amma, she sent one of her maidservants to go get the teva. But for our lives, for our story, for our understanding of the parasha, we have to realize that these words are being said here because Bereshit is informing Shemot. In Bereshit, when Sarah had said, Gareshet ha'ama ve'et bena, the Jewish woman was chasing out the Egyptian princess. What did Abraham do? Did he geresh ota, like Sarah had said? Even though God said everything Sarah says, you have to listen to her. He tweaked it a little bit. And you know what he did? Vayishlach et ha'ama. He didn't throw her out. He didn't chase her out. He sent her out. He gave her some water. He gave her on her shechma, on her shoulder, some bread to eat, which is how we end up leaving Egypt. Serurot besimlotam al shechmam. What we did for the Egyptian princess is now being repaid in spades to us. Because we sent out the Amma, now the princess is sending out her Amma, and she is retrieving our Moshe, who's going to be our Redeemer. Again, in as much as it's a miracle that the daughter of the dictator who made the edict is going to see the child, no, it's Jewish. She opens it up and she sees Na'ar Bocher, and she sees he's Meyaldeha Ivrim Zeh. Can't make this stuff up. That the daughter of the dictator is going to identify the baby as Jewish and still let him live. How do these miracles happen? So one of the things we have to realize is A, you have to do your part like his mother. Make a teva, be creative, do what you got to do. Miriam, you want miracles in your life? You got to stay positive. And what else is being said here? Don't discount what Yaakov told Ephraim and Menashe. You're part of a legacy. You're a child of Abraham, and Abraham did a kindness 1,000,000 years ago, and look how it's coming to roost. Look how it's coming now to fruition with this Egyptian princess taking care of a Jewish boy. These are all parts of our story, parts of our heritage. What is it telling to us today? Do we have any clue whatsoever what one kindness that we do today, what type of a domino effect it could have in the future? I see that the clock is ticking and it's time to end. I just want to make one little point further. This story ends very beautifully. The Miriam ends up having a conversation with the princess, and she arranges for the child's own mother to nurse the child, which is also so genius because she's going to pay her. So when you see Yocheved nursing a baby and the guards at the door want to take away that baby, she says, it's not my baby. Here, I'm going to show you. Here's Egyptian coins. I'm being paid by an Egyptian woman to nurse her baby. So there's no way that a Jewish woman would come in contact or possession of coins from the Egyptians unless they were being paid for a service. So every part of it is just so all the little microscopic pieces fall in place so beautifully. But I'd like to end today with, there's so many pieces, I don't know, I guess I'm going to end with the burning bush because it really brings together what we've been saying all day. What does the burning bush represent? You have fire and you have wood. Vehasne eneno uchal. But the snare, the bush, is not being consumed by the fire. What is that telling us in a nutshell? Asurana, says Moshe, let me change my perspective of the world. I thought the perspective was, or you have fire, or you have wood, or if they coexist, it's only for a limited time. Everybody knew how to build a fire. You put the wood, you put the fire, and then after the wood burns out, it's over. You end up with ashes. No, says God. And that's where we're able to understand and confirm the integration that we started the class with. It's not the fire or the wood, and it's not time bound. It's infinite. This integration that God wants to introduce us to, he's introducing it to Moshe with the burning bush. And he's telling him the natural and the supernatural are all integrated as one. And if you see and understand the integration, it's telling all of us, it's time for all of us to be asura. We all have to saddle it out. We all have to change our perspective, change the way we see things, change the way we see the natural world. Stop limiting ourselves. It's not one or the other, and it's not limited in time either. And when we see that these elements could coexist, then maybe we will internalize that God is in our chaos, that God is in our tohu vavohu, that God is in our Mitzrayim, that he always has been with us, always will be with us. He is never abandoning us. He is integrated. It's Aretz and Shamayim together as one. And when we own that and we believe that these are not miracles, these are our realities, when we believe that and we tap into the notion that we are part of a greater whole, that our ancestors have charted a course for us. And when we unite like those bundles, when we do all of these things, then what is the promise for us? We will, even if we're fish out of our waters, we will be able to proliferate. And God bless the Jewish people wherever we've been, wherever. It's the nicest thing you'll ever Google, which is accomplishment of the Jews. Whether it's medicine, whether it's science, whether it's technology, finance, come up with any arena in the intellectual world. The Jews are always at the forefront of that. And why do we succeed so much? Because this is what the parasha is telling us. We believe in the integration. It's not just the natural world or the supernatural world. It's the two together. It's the fire and it's the wood coexisting. When you see the coexistence, that's where you connect with God. That's where Moshe is able to have a conversation with God. It's not just Moshe. These knowledges are open for all of us to, I'm going to use the word integrate because I can't come up with another one, but to internalize. And I hope and I pray that, like Moshe, we take our weaknesses and rather than have them debilitate us, rather than have us think we can't, I'm not a man of words. Our weaknesses could be our greatest strengths, could be our superpowers, if we realize that we're never, ever managing any situation alone. There's always a level of godliness integrated in our daily lives today. With that, I end. I wish everybody a beautiful week. I thank you for joining us.